Hello, my learning to knit lovelies. These are a set of videos separate from the main channel where we're teaching you how to knit, making it simple, taking away the mystery. Have a look at last week's video first. That's when we learned how to cast on and do the basic knit stitch. Now, today is part 2, which is when we're going to learn how to purl and we're going to learn how to cast off or bind off. Some people call it. It's exactly the same thing. Don't worry about that. Just relax, enjoy, and I'll see you at the end. So last week we did the cast on and the knit stitch. So I hope you've been practicing those all week, and I hope as well you found it's much easier than you thought it was going to be. So this week we're going to practice the purl stitch. There are two main stitches in knitting, knit and purl. So we're going to look at the other stitch now. You already hopefully know how to do the knit stitch. So the knit stitch, we went into the stitch this way. What we're going to do with the purl stitch is we're actually going to go in this way. So the knit stitch goes from left to right and underneath the needle with the stitches on. The purl stitch goes from right to left and over the top of the needle that the stitches are on. Now, when we knit, automatically, if we're doing the knit stitch, the yarn is here at the back of the work. When we purl, it's actually the opposite. The yarn is at the front of the work. So with the yarn here at the front of the work, we're going to put the needle, the right hand needle, into the stitch from right to left and over the top of the working needle, this one, or the needle that the stitches are on, let's call it. We're going to go round the needle, so we're going to go over the top of the needle, pull it ever so slightly and slip that stitch off. We're going to go in this way, take the yarn round, slip the stitch off. We're going to go in, round, slip the stitch off. The rhythm is exactly the same as the knit, but rather than working this way, we're working this way. And remember, with a purl stitch, the yarn is always at the front of the work. That's important for later on when we're going to knit and purl in the same row. So we're going to go from right to left and over the top of the needle with the stitches on, take the yarn round over the top of that needle, pull it through, slip the stitch off. You'll already kind of have the feel of it because you've done so many knit stitches, hopefully. So we're going to work back in this direction now. We've changed hands. So remember, the needle goes from, or the right hand needle goes from right to left over the top of that needle. This yarn is at the front of the work. And we're going to take the yarn over the top of that needle, round and slip it off, over the top, slip it off, over the top, slip it off. You have to excuse these needles banging on the desk. It's a little bit difficult for me to get it all under the camera so you can see clearly what's going on. So this is then the purl stitch. So you've learned how to knit, you've learned how to purl. When you look at it, if you're going to do all purl stitches, it looks pretty much the same as when we're doing all knit stitches. So this would still be described as garter stitch, but we would call this purl garter stitch when every row is purl. Let's do another row. So the needle this time is going from right to left and over the top of the needle with the stitches on. Remember, for purl stitches your yarn is always at the front. So we're going to go round and slip that stitch off. We're going to go in, round, through and slip the stitch off. In, round, through, slip. 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 And you can build up quite quickly this way a rhythm. People who knit the continental way, this is called the English style of knitting, people who knit the continental way do seem to have problems with purling. Most of them don't like to purl for some reason or other, but when we knit this way, the English way, the rhythm is exactly the same as when we're doing the knit stitch. Again, please excuse these needles scratching on the table, that's going to be really irritating. And you can see we can very quickly build up a rhythm. We're going to swap hands. And yet again, remember, for purl, importantly, the yarn is always at the front. What will happen if you try and purl and the yarn is at the back, this will come over this needle when you purl, and you'll end up, as you can see, with 2 stitches on. And sometimes we want to do that if we're going to increase, or if we're knitting lace, we want to do what we call a yarn over, but in this instance we don't, so therefore the yarn is always at the front. So we're going to go through, round, through. So we're going to go in, round, through and slip. 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 Get into a really nice, relaxed, gentle rhythm. I'm going to do one more row. So yarn at the front, that's important. This needle goes from right to left and over the top of the needle that's got the stitches on, and a nice gentle rhythm. Of course, if you were knitting this on your knee, you wouldn't have this awful noise of the needles banging on the table. So that's the purl stitch, and if you compare this with garter stitch when it's all knit, you'll see it's pretty much the same. So this only changes when we start to mix knit and purl stitches together, which I'm going to show you the next time. So before we do that, we've got to learn to cast off. So, or bind off, some people call that. We in English style knitting call it cast on and cast off. It's the same thing as bind off if you read it on a pattern. Don't be confused by that, it's exactly the same thing. So we can bind off either in knit or purl, it doesn't matter. We can bind off in a combination of the two, it doesn't matter. Because this is all purl stitches, I'm going to bind off in purl. So exactly the same as we've done before with the purl stitch, but we're just going to purl 2 stitches. The first stitch, which was here, we're going to pop that needle in and we're going to slip it over the top of that stitch. That's bind off or cast off 1. we're going to purl another stitch, we're going to go into that first stitch, take it over the top of that stitch. So we've bind off or cast off 2, do another stitch, take that stitch over the top, do another stitch, take that stitch over the top, do another stitch, take that stitch over the top, and you can see what is happening here. We're actually fastening off these stitches and making a nice neat edge of it. So just carry on, purl 1 stitch, slip that first stitch over, purl, slip that stitch over, purl, slip that stitch over, purl, slip that stitch over, and then we've ended up with just 1 stitch left on the needle. We're going to break the yarn, or cut it is probably better, but I've come down to the studio without any scissors. We're going to pull up a big loop there. We're going to pass that yarn that we've just cut through that stitch and then pull it, and that will fasten that off. And there we've done purl, and then we've done cast off or bind off. So this is the practice then for this week. It's cast on like we did last week, just purl, 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 and bind off. They're the practices. Next week we can actually start to look at what knit and purl stitches look like together, and we can also do some increase and decrease, so we can start to shape these knitted pieces so we can actually make a garment. It's as easy as that, really. There's nothing more to it. So keep practicing. Do your cast on, your knit stitch, your purl stitch, and your cast off. When you can do those 4 things, you can actually call yourself a knitter. So hope you enjoyed that. Back to the main camera. So I hope all that made sense. Keep practicing. Just relax, enjoy. Don't grip onto those needles too tightly. It's supposed to be a nice experience. It really is. So I never said at the beginning, but if you haven't seen me before, I'm Simon Henry. You're very welcome to join me here every week in my studio in central UK. If you like and subscribe, or just click on the subscribe button, which will be down there somewhere, then it will tell you when the next videos are coming. Next time we're going to look at doing some increases and some decreases, and we're going to combine a little bit of knit and purl together, and then the time after you're leaning towards being ready to actually knit something you can wear. Simple as that, honestly. And hopefully you've enjoyed. If I'm missing something, or if I'm not making myself clear, just have a little mention of that in the comments, and I'll see what I can do for you next week. It's been lovely to have you along. In the meantime, happy knitting, very much love as always, and I'm going to see you really soon. Bye bye.